Okay, in order to find the 3 points where the curve cuts the x-axis, we need to put y equal to 0. And in this case, y is the same as f of x, so I could write the equation of the curve as y equals x cubed minus 3x squared minus 4x, and we're going to put y equal to 0 because that's the equation of the x-axis. So I can write that x cubed minus 3x squared minus 4x is equal to 0. Now I've spotted that there's a common factor here of x, so I can take that out and I'm left with, in a bracket, x squared minus 3x minus 4, and that again equals 0. And if I factorise that quadratic, I've got x and then two brackets equals 0, and must have x at the beginning of each bracket. Two numbers multiply together to make minus 4. Well, it's going to have to be 4 and 1, so that we've got a minus there and a plus there. So these three multiply together to equal 0, which means that either x equals 0, or x minus 4 is 0, so that would be x equals 4, or x plus 1 equals 0, which means that x is equal to minus 1. So the 3 points where the curve cuts the x-axis are 0, 0, remember y is 0 in each case, and 4, 0, and minus 1, 0. Now, to sketch the graph, we've already got quite a lot of information. We know where the curve cuts the x-axis at these 3 points here. We also know the shape of the curve because we've got a cubic curve, which means that it's either going to look like that or it might look like that. In this case, though, the x cubed term is positive, which means the gradient starts positive, ends negative. So we're looking at this shaped graph, which cuts the x-axis in these 3 places. Let me just draw an axis. So here's my x-axis, here's my y-axis. Where the graph cuts, it cuts here at 0, 0. It cuts here at minus 1, 0. And it also cuts here at 4, 0, which means the shape of the graph must be something like this. Okay, so that's the graph of y equals f of x. Okay, it now says you're given that g of x, so this is a different function, g of x is this lot here, and it says find the remainder when g of x is divided by x plus 1. Now the remainder theorem says that if we find g of minus 1, then, so this is x plus 1, so we choose the reverse sign here, so we should be able to find the remainder by finding g of minus 1. I'll do it over here so I can see what's going on. Sorry, this is b. So we want to find g of minus 1, or g of minus 1, well that's going to be minus 1 cubed, minus 3 lots of minus 1 squared, minus 4 times minus 1, plus 12. Well, that's minus 1. Minus 1 squared is 1, so 1 times minus 3 is minus 3. Minus 4 times minus 1 is plus 4, plus 12. Well, this is minus 4. Minus 4 plus 4 is 0, which means that the remainder, when you divide g of x, that's this function, by x plus 1, the remainder will be 12. Now, an extension of the remainder theorem is the factor theorem. If x minus 2 is a factor of g of x, then it should be that g of 2 should equal 0, okay, because that will mean there's no remainder when you divide g of x by x minus 2. It divides exactly into g of x. So if we find g of 2 then, well, g of 2 is going to be, so g of 2 is going to be 2 cubed minus 3 lots of 2 squared minus 4 times 2 plus 12. Well, that's the same as 8 minus, well, 3 fours are 12, minus 8, and then plus 12. And we can see easily that that's equal to 0. So g of 2 is equal to 0, means that x minus 2 is a factor. So x minus 2 is a factor of g of x. And the question then says, solve the equation g of x is equal to 0. So this is part 3. We've got to solve the equation where g of x equals to 0. Now that's the same as solving x cubed minus 3x squared minus 4x plus 12 is equal to 0. Now we've just discovered that x minus 2 is a factor of that. Now that means that this left-hand side can be written as x minus 2 times something equals 0. Now we could do long division here, but it's usually easier to spot by inspection what's going to have to go in the brackets here. There's going to have to be an x squared term here, because x times x squared gives us x cubed. To get the plus 12 here, I'm going to have to put minus 6 here, because the plus 12 comes from just doing this times this. It's the x term which is always slightly more difficult. Now the x term here, we know that we need to have minus 3x squared. Now, the x squared terms come from doing this one times this one. Well, that gives us minus 2x squared. And then this term times this term, so we're looking for something to go here. Well, if we want minus 3x squared altogether, we know we're going to have to get minus x squared from doing this times this. So that's just going to have to be minus 1. So we can now, we could also have done algebraic division. We could have done it like this. How many x minus 2's are there in x cubed minus 3x squared minus 4x plus 12? Now just look at the x and the x cubed. What do we need to multiply x by to get x cubed? Well, that's x squared. Now we do the multiplication, so x squared times x is x cubed, minus 2 times x squared is minus 2x squared. We're doing long division, so we subtract. If I subtract these two, it disappears. Minus 3 minus 2x squared, so I'm subtracting here. Minus 3 take away minus 2x squared is minus 3 plus 2x squared, which comes out as minus x squared. And we now bring down this minus 4x. And we ask ourselves again, how many x's are there in minus x squared? Well, we have to multiply x by minus x to get minus x squared. Now do the multiplication. Minus x times x is minus x squared. Minus x times minus 2 is plus 2x. Again, subtract. Minus 4x, these disappear. Minus 4x minus 2x is minus 6x. Bring down the plus 12. What do we multiply x by to get minus 6x? Answer, minus 6. And then do the multiplication. Minus 6 times x is minus 6x. Minus 6 times minus 2 is plus 12. As we would expect, there's no remainder because we know that x minus 2 is a factor. And again, we get the same x squared minus x minus 6. Now I can factorize the x squared minus x minus 6. Factorize this to 2 brackets, equals 0. Got x here. To make 6, I'm going to use 3 and 2. I want to make minus x, so it's going to be a minus there, plus there. So we've now got these 3 brackets multiplied together and equal 0. So either x is 2, or from this bracket x would be 3, or from this bracket x would equal minus 2. And there's my solution.